Well, let's get started. Thanks so much for joining us for this edition of Fresh from the Studio. We are honored today to have four artists talk about their work with us. Joan Roberts Garcia, Jesselyn Gordon, Molly Mansfield, and Alexis Sones will be presenting. Each artist will have about 10 minutes to discuss their work. Feel free to put your questions or comments in the chat and we'll address them all at the end. But today we're going to start with Alexis Sones.
Hi, everyone. Thanks, Diane, and thanks, Anne, so much for having me today. I'm so excited for this. So I'm Alexis. I moved to Austin about a year and a half ago from Los Angeles. I am blown away by the community here, especially the artist community, and how supportive it's been. And it's just such a breath of fresh air. So thank you, everyone who's joined today. So welcome to my studio. I'm going to give you a quick glance around so you can kind of check out the context here and also just explain a little bit about my process at the same time. So hopefully I'm like steady with my computer. So I have quite a bit of work that I work on at the same time. This one's very large. Sorry, I can't show the whole thing at once. It's 8 feet tall. I do all oil paintings and then a bunch of acrylic on paper. Sometimes, since I'm working on 10 to 15 paintings at once, I have my drying rack over there. And this is kind of the full view. So as you can see, color is a huge part of my world. And I would say that the fundamental aspect of how I paint is making decisions based on colors. I mostly have no idea where anything is going. And I just know what color I'm going to choose next, pretty much. So that's kind of the core of it. But usually by the time I've completed a series where things have seemed pretty cohesive, there is a mythological framework that sort of appears and lands in my lap. And I'm obsessed with all things Greek mythology and all types of mythology from all over the world. And whether it's picking up a book that I've already read or a new story, I just realized, oh my gosh, I didn't really know fully how to describe what was happening here until a story or a group of stories appears and I can actually explain in words what I was actually creating for however many months or years. So I'm going to share my screen and show you guys an example of what my process is with the current work that I'm doing. Let's see. Okay, so this is what a first layer of a painting would look like. This is when I really don't know what's going on. It's just that I know what colors I want to use. And then this is the second layer. I really build a lot of layers usually. I'm actually kind of cutting that back recently because I want to be more clear about my foreground and my background. And it's in the past been kind of hazy, like you're not sure what was forward, what was back. And so I'm doing some things differently now. With this painting in particular, this is brand new for me, but I had made a sketch and for some reason, I just thought that doing this a version of this sketch on that particular piece might look cool. So I started to do that, and you could see the beginnings of that sketch forming here. And this is probably the one layer where I was following the drawing and then I just took my own liberties. So you can see that it's building more. I wanted to create more contrast. And then I turned the painting upside down and we ended here. So another part of my process is also constantly turning the paintings. And then this one in particular, I felt like something special was happening. And when that clicks, that feels really good. So I decided to continue along this theme. But this painting in particular, as I just described, that this exactly how it formed. There wasn't a super conscious intention for how it was going to happen. I was just kind of following the colors, following my instincts. And then now that I saw how it turned out and like it, I know how to continue the series from here in a more conscious, intentional way. And so I started making a lot more sketches like I did with the other one. And for example, you could see this one turned into this guy. One thing I forgot to say, you saw when I was moving my computer around, is that these are pretty large. So all of the past two were 5 feet tall and 4 feet wide. I like to work big. I'm actually trying to experiment with smaller canvases because I don't feel that my work translates very well small, and I really need to work on that. But in the meantime, I love working big. So here's another example of a sketch that then turned into this one, also 5 feet tall and 4 feet wide. And the last one I have is here. I actually made 2 of these. I don't have the other image yet, but I made the same one twice and the other one is upside down. And I am really enjoying how different they're turning out. Even though I worked from the same sketch, I noticed that a lot of the elements that I would paint in the first one would either be smaller or non-existent in the second one. And I would take different parts of the sketch depending on the fact that I had it upside down or right side up. So you can see those 2 in the back are, I'm doing the same kind of thing where I chose the same sketch, but they're flipped. So that is pretty much everything I have for today. And I'm excited to take any questions towards the end. I hope that was interesting. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Our second presenter is Molly Mansfield.
Hi, thank you so much, Diane and Anne, for having me. I'm excited to share my work. So my name is Molly Mansfield, and I live just outside of Austin in Elgin. And I make oil paintings centered around the tabletop, floral imagery, and pattern to explore themes of family, belonging, and memory. And I'm really interested in the roles that women play as nurturers and sustainers of communities. So this is the first painting that I made with a quilt that really put more of an emphasis on the tabletop and on the fabric. It stood out to me as being very different from more traditional compositionally still lifes I had done like this. So the table or picnic blanket has been a symbol of community and gathering for me. And I've been obsessed with this theme of tables and textiles in my work. At the time I began making these paintings, my studio was in a school bus. So I was painting on medium to large canvases from life, and the space itself really contributed to these works because my easel was scrunched right up next to my still life. So from where I was standing at the easel, I couldn't see the whole table, which is what I really wanted. So I would use my sketchbook and draw a top-down view. I would step all the way back and draw. I would look at each side of the table and draw, so that when I was in the painting, I could reference the still life next to me and the drawings. This process is what gave these paintings the feeling of multiple perspectives. So my husband and I were fostering at this time, and so the idea of perspective was really in my mind. It was something I was thinking about a lot as I was thinking about family and pursuing empathy and understanding for bio parents, children, foster and adopt parents, which are largely biracial families. My creative process is very intuitive, and I find it interesting how I wasn't necessarily trying to put this idea of perspective into the work, but it is what came out. So I've been using quilts from my family. A few were given to me by friends, and some, like this one, were purchased through Facebook Marketplace. I like that the quilts and other objects in my paintings hold their own story, from how it came into existence to being used or passed down and how it came to me. So much of its history, though, is unknown. And as a mother and now an adoptive mother, I'm navigating what it looks like to preserve heritage for someone from a different culture than me, whose history is partly unknown. I've wanted to incorporate hands into my work. In Native American art, hands are a symbol for the earliest tools and also used to mark territory. I thought that this corresponds well with my themes of home and women's labor. I haven't included a figure yet in my paintings because this uninhabited table gives a certain feeling of isolation, which I like. So I've been using gloves to be representative of hands in some of these works. I also have included some eggs. An interesting fact, the egg that created you was formed inside your mother's fetus, inside your grandmother's womb. So there's this very deep connection to maternal grandmothers. And I think that is so beautiful and interesting in the light of thinking about family ties and personal histories. In my research about quilts, I've come across many amazing quilters. Some of my favorites are Rosie Lee Tompkins and Nora Ezel. I'm inspired by the grit that these women have and the improvisational nature of the process that is seen in a lot of African American quilting. So this is a picture of Nora Ezel, whom I'm obsessed with. And I think her outfit is so on point, but this photo was taken in 1992. So there's a short-lived art movement in the 1970s called pattern and decoration. And something that I really latched onto from this movement is taking inspiration outside of your medium and culture. I love that the women and some of the men in this movement gave credit and value to the craft traditions they were looking at. So I've pieced my first quilt, making my own pattern based on a somewhat common pattern that I've seen in images of American quilts. This process of piecing, like using what you have, scraps, making something out of nothing, placing colors and patterns next to each other and responding, is extremely interesting to me, and I'm feeling an inclination to use a similar piecing process in my paintings. I don't know exactly what that will look like yet, but I have a solo show coming up in July, and I have some time marked on my calendar after that just for experimenting and playing with these ideas in the studio. Something that I've felt for a while in my practice is that the next painting is the painting that I'm most excited about. So that is it. Thank you for letting me share my work with you.
Thanks so much.
Hey, I think I'm next.
Yes.
This is
Next up is
scary.
Jesselyn.
Okay. I guess I should talk about myself first, huh?
Yeah.
My name is Jesselyn. I've been in San Antonio for about 15 years now. Artist community is thriving here, super lovely people. A lot of my work is based off of that community that is thriving. So I just moved into my new studio space. It's called House Barn. It's located in Dignowdy Hill on the east side of downtown San Antonio. So here I actually have 9 residents underneath me. They're super talented artists. Most of them are ceramic artists because it's a ceramic studio, but I also have 2 oil painters and a broom maker in the space. So it's very cool. Lots of community here. Yeah, so fun. This is some of my production work. I make a lot of this for local restaurants in the city. This is basically how you make money as a self-employed artist, right? So you got to do something to support yourself. Right now I'm throwing all of my work on the wheel for restaurants. These cups are specifically made for like mezcal drinks. At a new bar that's opening up on 1604 called Sings. I'm really biased because I'm friends with the owners, but you should really go if you're ever in San Antonio. It's really good. And then I have some thrown plates, some bowls. I'm working on getting together like custom orders on my website. Right now it's all made like I get together with the restaurant, we plan stuff based on what they want to serve on it or out of it. But hopefully I'm going to get into slip casting and be able to do stuff like that. So it's just like a quicker thing. And I really want to get up to Austin with this stuff as well. So this is some of my previous exhibition work, like installation stuff. Over here on the left, this piece is called cathexis, which is a type of love that you have between like 2 people or within yourself. It's just really toxic. So I'm sure we've all been in like codependent relationships, things like that. This piece is kind of about that. So there's beautiful parts, right? There's those flowers, then there's the chains kind of dragging you down, things like that. On the right side, this piece was from a solo exhibition in my boss's closet. It's really cool. I made like 70 yards of these chains. This is just half of the closet. And then nested in those chains are these globes that I threw on the wheel. And so you're kind of imagining yourself as this globe and you're being held by these communities, the chain links. And while I was making that work, a lot of the time I was thinking like, I mean, it's very medium based, you know, it's ceramic, it's very fragile. So each chain would break every once in a while and every chain's as strong as its weakest link, right? And I think that we can kind of view that in community in a way. I was going through a breakup at this time, so it's like maybe a darker piece. Yeah, kind of like a feeling of hopelessness, but also this was in a really small closet. So there was no room for you to really be in there. So just the vast amount of chains taking up all of that room gave you a feeling of kind of like being overwhelmed. And that's kind of how I was feeling in a lot of my relationships at the time. And then the piece down on the bottom in the middle is kind of like the resolve of all of these. It's called Attachments Aside. Everything's at rest, you know. And then this is my solo show coming up in July. It's called My Body's Not My Body. This is a piece I made literally 2 days ago because this show was given to me very last minute. I was like, yeah, of course I can do that. And, you know, here we are. So the idea is to have a bunch of these vessels wrapped in chains. I wrote a song last year with the title My Body's Not My Body. And it's kind of about being born a woman and being kind of an instant disappointment. So like you go throughout your life trying to make up for the fact that you're not a man, right? So if you find yourself in San Antonio next month, I'll be here. This is a solo exhibition I have in November called Blooms Before Me. This was inspired by a Mary Oliver poem called Poet Goes to the Fine Arts Museum. And she finds herself looking at all of these paintings of roses in one of the rooms in the museum. And she starts talking about this concept of like how many years that many flowers had grown before. And so like the total sum of every flower that's ever existed to get to this point, things like that. And so that really inspired me to, again, connect that to community here. So I'm holding free flower making workshops out of porcelain in my studio once a month until that show, just to get a whole bunch of flowers that I can just put up in the space to just kind of showcase the beautiful community that we have here. Yeah, this piece, I think I'm really excited for this show. It's kind of one of those things you can't really sell, you know, but I think the concept is pretty cool. This is some previous flower work that I've done. And yeah, I'm super excited.
Thanks so much. And next up, we have Joan Roberts Garcia.
Hi. First of all, I'd just like to introduce myself, Joan Roberts Garcia, and I have recently moved to Placitas, New Mexico, back to New Mexico from New York City, where I lived in artist housing going back and forth between New Mexico and New York. Before that, I lived in Mexico City, and before that, I lived in Dallas. And the thing is, my studio in Corrales, New Mexico, does not have internet. So I was given permission and asked a friend if she would please video me in the studio. And that is what you're going to see. I decided to focus on 5 pieces of work, which are of the same body of work, even though they weren't all done at the same time. The last piece was finished just a few months ago. So it is current, it is ongoing. It is of landscape and connections and geometric forms that I'm constantly discovering in nature, and forms that appear in my work, which seem to have come from that observation, but I wasn't aware of it until I was actually doing it. The subject matter is not as important to me as forms that I discover. And so while some of these pieces were developing, other pieces of different things were happening, but these pieces seem to really speak with each other. That's why I chose them. Let's see, what else? They are going to be discussed chronologically as they were created. And the first one you're going to see is called My Trip to Venice. They're all kind of autobiographical. This is called My Trip to Venice because it had taken me a lifetime just about to get there. And it was a process, one of trading my artist studio and home in New York for a beautiful place in Venice. One of the creative ways I've had to use to get to these places that I want to see. When I went to Venice, I was struck by the 2 things primarily: verticals and reflection. That's what I reduced it to. And I took these pictures. It's a very, very famous view. I pieced this together so I could get more of the shape of the water. But the verticals, they came down through the building and then down through the piers. That is what struck me, and the reflection off of the water. So when I got home, I had a vintage leafed board, and I started working on that and got the angle of the water. This is the old leaf, and then this is aluminum leaf that I put on so that the light would bounce off of it the way it did. These verticals are done with lacquer and oil paint, some acrylic, and then this is Japan paint, because that's like a shadow in the photographs, and I wanted it to absorb the light. So this is Japan paint, the pier. And I got so involved in the verticals, I couldn't stop, so I put strips of linen there. While I painted my trip to Venice, I did what artists often do, and I actually preferred this way because it showed the abstraction. This shape that had drawn me, the obvious things it draws, but then there are these forms that are the skeleton, and that's what I was drawn to in this. So it's that shape that I thought parabola. It was going out into infinite. Window to Heaven. I had was awarded a residency in Pennsylvania, and it was a beautiful studio, and this was the view out of the studio window. I was totally alone there. There was a writer there for a short period of time, but he left, and I just thought, I don't have to go any further than this, and because I was really drawn to the view. Now, for my paintings, I usually take photographs, different aspects of the photographs I take and use them as I want them. I don't work from one photograph. It keeps it from being very stiff. So this piece was like that, but I thought it was too picturesque. So, and it wasn't about being picturesque. It was about light and edges and abstraction. So this painting can be turned all four ways. I usually hang it anyway, but the way it was when I painted it. I was driving through the countryside after a rain, and I was taken with the flash off of this driveway and the curve in the road and the wet delineated grasses. So I took a number of photographs of that scene. I had to keep going back whenever it rained. Like, I did not paint this in Pennsylvania. I waited till I got back to New York, and the next year I painted this. It's called Turn in the Road. And it was during the pandemic that I worked on this, nonstop, nothing else. What I was attracted to was the flash, which was done in leaf. And this is a metallic paint. This is oil and acrylic, and this is mostly oil down here. But what really captivated me about this scene were the connections that I saw. The light was showing it to me. These little shapes like that, and the way this side was connected to that side, and the deep holes and openings. When I got to this part, you know, I lived 8 years in Mexico as a young woman, and that affected my color for a while. It was very high color and high textured. But this is a very Mexican part of this painting. It reminds me of some of their structures that I saw in their work. And it was very different from me because I'm usually pretty gestural, as you might be able to see. But I sat there with a tiny brush, and I really looked for every connection that I could find. It was hard on my eyes, but it was great fun. Is that enough? I built up the layers in this painting as I saw them in the photographs. I realized that there were not only the connections, only the holes in these strange shapes. This little shape appears enlarged in other paintings. I like to find similarities of form within my work, just like I like to find similarities of form in nature. And as I worked, I started to feel like the top layer was stretched over this. This is one of my membrane paintings. I had the idea of pet sitting. I got invited to go to this beautiful place in the Cotswolds. While there, they had fixed up the barn for me as a studio, but I couldn't be in England and stay in a barn. So I went out walking and hiking and taking buses, etc., to see different sites. I was overwhelmed by the green. I couldn't find anything that I could kind of hook into because of my years in New Mexico. I like a different type of landscape. The very last day I went for a walk and I came across this tree. Now the trees in England are like 500 years old. It was completely dark except for this beautiful green light that came from behind. So I took a lot of different photographs of this tree. And when I got back to the States, I had another type of residency. I traded my studio in New York again for a studio in Corrales, New Mexico. And there I started to paint beach in the Cotswolds. Started with a large acrylic painting, very gestural, and then I went over it in oil in almost all the areas. Sometimes I like to show a little bit of the acrylic beginning, showing through. I consider this what I call a membrane painting. It was the first of those for me, and in so many layers, but it seemed almost like there was a tension, like stretched over the top of this. This shape is important to me. It shows up in my work over and over again, but once again, I was noticing connections that were actually in nature. I wasn't making up any of these things. These shapes, this strange thing that looks like some kind of cricket to me was actually in there. And the holes, these holes I saw throughout. And the way branches and leaves would connect with these curvilinear forms. I see these throughout nature now in different places. About a year ago, I was in Ojito, which is a beautiful area outside of Albuquerque, and with a friend, and we'd been hiking. I saw this perfect curve in the canyon, and I wanted to take a photograph, and so I went back the next day and I took more photographs, different angles. In preparation for this piece, I just couldn't figure out this curve. How could I express that curve? So I asked him, my friend who was an engineer, if he would graph this curve. So he did. This is a photograph he sent to me getting ready to graph my curve. And that's the scientific graph of my curve. So Ojito started with acrylic. I knew I wanted 3 divisions in this painting, at least 3. I knew I wanted the sky to be brilliant but flat, and I didn't want all the vegetation. I saw this was bluish, and then this area in here, pretty much this is oils over some acrylic. Now this area was tricky because I wanted to get the feeling of incrustation that I saw in the photograph. So this actually started with acrylic, and then I put charcoal, and I put sand, and pastels, and oil paint. And I just want to say that I feel what I saw, and hopefully what I somewhat depicted, was this sense of movement frozen in stone, this wave that went up. So like my trip to Venice, when I worked on curve in Ojito, I worked on it from all directions. And this way I felt I could not focus so much on the landscape aspects as on the abstraction and the curve itself. Ojito, to take photographs, I thought I had found the curve, and I took photographs of this scene. And I realized later it was not the curve I had seen at all, but another type of curve. And what really excited me was this light line that goes around here, because I've noticed these things in nature, that a lot of forms will have lines of color around them. This is probably the grasses and the light hitting on the grasses, and I liked this roughness, this sculptural roughness back there, and once again this dark. So it was interesting to me, and how this seems to be split at the wire. So these are things that I'm very interested in now, and I will continue to investigate.
I also have everyone's websites and social medias in the chat too to follow along with. Looks like there's some exciting things coming up for y'all. Also, all the artists who participated today are members of our artist registry too. So you can go to our website and learn a little bit more about them. But at this point, I'd like to open up the floor for some questions. Feel free to speak up or type a question in the chat, and I'm happy to read those out loud too.
I'm gonna jump it off. I think that form is like a really big concept throughout all of our work. So I guess it's kind of open-ended, but like, how are you inspired by the forms that you see? Like Joan just went into that really cool curve. I love that. That's so neat. Oh, and then I have another question. I'm so crazy. But Joan, do you work with the painting sideways so it's abstracted for you?
Yes.
And then when you display it, it's in a
Yes.
landscape?
There's
That's
something
so neat.
there's something about objective work turned so that it scrambles your logic that I like a lot. And I think I first saw that in Indian artwork, where they have these very abstracted gods and goddesses with these big fat bellies, you know, and so I like that mixture very much. Yeah, thank you for
Very cool. And then how is form in y'all's work, Alexis and Molly?
I would say recently, actually, the paintings that I just showed, form is huge. And as I kind of figure out what is happening with this body of work, I know there's a lot going on around boundaries, which I am currently really working on in my life, personally and professionally. And I just have found it interesting that every time I kind of put one of the abstract creatures or bodies, or I keep seeing them as maybe land masses, definitely forms. Sometimes I get feedback that they look like mitochondria, but I also think it could be a whole ecosystem or a body or a zoom in of a tiny microscopic cell. But I always start with that outline, and then a big thing has been emphasizing it so that it comes forward off of the foreground. So, and that's been a big, as I was saying before, that's been a big deal in my new work, to just be more clear. It was very abstract before, and I think a little confusing at what message it was trying to send, and focusing on clear form has, as I become more clear as a woman as well and a human, it's totally coincided with and everything that's going on personally. it's a really big deal. So I really like that question, Jesselyn.
Yeah, it's nice.
I
Yeah,
like how, sorry, I just really like how you said like that those kind of like forms overlap in your personal life and things like that, but we still have to have control over it. I'm so sorry, Molly.
Oh, that's okay. Yeah, I think for me, the main form that I'm thinking about is that like kind of image of the tabletop or like that blanket, and just how it like flows and moves and lays, and then also the symbolism for me that it holds.
I really enjoy your the multiple angles of your work. That was really neat, and how that creates its own form, that abstracted shape. It's very neat.
Yeah, thank you. Jesselyn, I loved your piece, the one in the closet with all the chains. And I think that closet, like space, it seems like that space really accentuated or emphasized the work because of the light and the shadows that were cast on the walls and the floor. I love that.
It was actually really funny because the light switch for that closet is all the way in the back. And the show was up for like 4 months. So he paid for the power to be on in that closet for four
Oh my.
months. And I was like, oh, thank God the light bulb never went out, you know? So funny.
Could you elaborate? Do you feel comfortable like talking more about the significance of the chains for you?
Yeah, so I mean, I was always really interested in the form of chains, right? So all of these similar shapes constructed to make one larger piece, right? But it's still malleable. That movement is always involved. Um, yeah, and it was really, I was just like very interested in it, and I kind of needed some boring, monotonous work. So I just started making an F ton of chains. And I think throughout the process, I started to understand them a little bit more, kind of the gravity of them, those overlaps that you see from your personal life and your work, you know. Yeah, I just really liked that. Yeah, okay, and then I was thinking about this the other day. A lot of people, when they saw it, they were like, "Oh, were you like into BDSM?" And I'm like, "No, like that's just like people again looking at women's work and just sexualizing it and making it what it's not, you know what I mean?" So that's another concept of why that work is interesting to me. I'm not really sure. I just kind of make forms and throw them together, you know?
Yeah,
So
Jesselyn, I thought it was, oh, I'm so sorry, Joe. You can go ahead.
I just had one quick question. So all those chains were made from clay. You made all those chains from clay?
Yeah, so I made them with a low fire clay, so I only had to fire them once, and they're unglazed so that they're still malleable. You can move them around. Right now, they're just in like 3 or 4 or 5 gallon buckets in my backyard waiting for a home.
Yeah, I also wanted to comment on the chains. I thought it was a really good use of like the metaphor that chain is as strong as its weakest link. And I'm wondering if when you were first making them, if you kind of expected that to happen or if it happened and you were kind of like surprised and if that kind of informed the concept of your artwork going forward after that.
Yeah, so I teach a lot of classes like throwing on the wheel and things like that. And I always tell people working with clay is like having a conversation with someone. It responds to you, but you also respond to it. So that concept of it being as weak as its weakest link, or as strong as its weakest link, came from the process of making them and things breaking throughout the process. So that was a surprise to me. I kind of just went into it blindly, and you know, the clay is an interesting medium to work with because you can't get attached to it ever. Stuff breaks all the time. So if I get a commission, it's like I have to make 7 of that one thing and hope something survives, you know?
Wow. That's beautiful. I actually have a question for Alexis. You briefly mentioned mythology making its way into your paintings. And I was wondering if you could kind of speak more to that concept, especially when you were talking about the form from Jesselyn's question, like mitochondrial, and having it such like a huge mythology being such a big theme too. I just want to hear more about that.
Totally. I think at the moment, that context hasn't quite landed with the work I showed because I'm still so in it, but I'll tell you about the last series I did, which that really big painting that I showed on the wall that's 8 feet tall, and there's that kind of eye in the middle, and some people have commented that that is like a cell or a whole world or this kind of macro micro situation. And I actually was did this painting last year, and then this year I was in a class about the Odyssey, and I did like a reading group. And there was this moment in the Odyssey where I don't know if you all remember, Odysseus meets the Cyclops, and there's all this stuff that goes down. But when he's leaving, he stabs the Cyclops in the eye, and he could have just escaped because he never told the Cyclops his name. He said his name was nobody. And instead of keeping his identity a secret, he declared who he was. He was like, tell everyone I am Odysseus. And that is when all hell breaks loose, because Poseidon is the father of the Cyclops and just wreaks havoc over Odysseus for the next 10 years. So there's that whole journey that happens. And obviously I did not have the same experience, but I had an experience of kind of declaring, this is me, this is who I am. And that really clashing with a lot of the people that were close to me. And it was actually a really rough couple years, but having that context of the myth was enormously helpful. And I started to realize that this painting and the other ones in the series that had that I theme were so connected to this personal process of really individuating, separating myself from my old life, and being okay that when I basically said, this is who I am and I'm moving on from what came before, that the hell that broke loose was actually somehow a gift. And I learned so much from it. So I am sorry that I don't have that context for this current work yet, because it's still so fresh and I'm in whatever story that it's still happening. It hasn't totally made itself clear yet. But when that happens, I will let you know.
Nice. Beautifully said. Thank you.
Alexis, I'm curious about the pieces behind you that are not on a square. Are those just on like loose canvas?
Yes. So the one that, let's see.
Yeah.
This one is on paper. This one is on canvas. I have another one on the floor that's also on canvas. And I started doing these in acrylic because oil takes so long to dry, and I needed something to, when I'm waiting for something to dry, to do in between. And that barrel, I don't know if you guys have ever worked with Art Direct, but they're doing like a charity auction with these barrels. So I'm pretty excited about these designs that I'm doing because they seem like, I've gotten a lot of feedback that they're pretty accessible and also versatile. Like I could they could be more in a graphic universe, or these were actually the odd shapes. I was thinking of them as rugs. So more potential for like collaboration and other types of projects. While oil is totally my #1 love, I am honestly relieved that I found something that I really like to do that doesn't take as long.
Yeah, they're beautiful. And so are you intending to like hang them on the wall?
So
Like how will you, I really like the shapes.
thank you. Yeah, I'm actually thinking of doing these shapes and doing some kind of sculptural experiments with the other work that I was showing on the slides, and not just working on a square. I didn't make them to be hung on the wall. They were made to be rugs on the floor, but I like them on the wall, so I think I'm gonna keep them there, and also have that possibility for sure. I'm glad you like them.
Nice. Well, I just want to see if there's any final questions. I see we're kind of getting close to one now. I know some folks might be on their lunch break at the time. But yeah, Sarai, did you have a question?
I did. Actually, for you of all people, what made you start this kind of program for women in art? What inspired that?
Oh, actually, I might defer to my colleague Diane,
Mhm.
who has been doing this a whole lot longer. So Diane, please.
Yes, we started in, I believe, February of 2021.
Wow, so it's
We-
recent.
yeah,
Sorry.
but for a couple of years, this particular program, I don't know if you're asking about maybe women in their work in general, which has been an organization since 1978.
No, just your program. Like, when did you guys get invested in this program?
In Fresh from the Studio.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, 2021, and it really came out of the pandemic and like trying to provide a platform for people to share what they were working on because we were so, isolated. But it's been so fascinating to learn about you all's processes and what projects you're working on in these kind of like little short presentations. So we've just kept doing it, and yeah, we enjoy it.
That was awesome. Oh, really appreciate it. I actually have a question for everyone, but it seems like we're kind of short on time, so I'll just run through. For Molly, she makes her objects tell a story. Like, it's like that's not easy to do. It's definitely interesting. How do you make it tell a story without it just being a plain object like a cup on a table? It actually has a lot to say, and I think that's really interesting. Was that something that you found hard to do, or it just came naturally?
Yeah, I think that's just part of my process in using, particularly thinking about quilts and using heirloom objects and objects that are significant to me or that like are representative or relate to women, and how just their like journey, the journey of each object. And that's something that I'm thinking about in the work, and just how it got to me and what it means to me. And so I think it just comes out in the painting. And yeah, that's really cool.
Okay, thank you. That's a really good answer, though. So Miss Joanne, or is it Jonah? I'm so sorry.
Joan.
Miss
Joan.
Yeah, Joan. Joan. It's nice to meet you, by the way. I live in New Mexico myself, but you said something about throwing sand in one of your paintings for movement. Do you use a lot of sand, or is that kind of a one-time thing? How did that,
I don't
was it
quite
hard to work
understand
with?
the question. What was the question?
Oh, why and how do you use sand in your paintings? I noticed one of your paintings in particular, you said you threw like sand in there for movement,
Oh, yeah,
and it
sand.
definitely had a lot to it.
It's I think rather than have the work be realistic, which I don't want it to do, I want it to be mimetic. I want it to actually share the expression that I saw. And that was rough with raking black light. And so I recreated it with sand and gravel and pastel, etc. I try to recreate the feelings that these things give me. So I don't use it always. It depends upon the piece. Yeah. I used to work in mixed media a lot
Yeah.
and then went back to painting. So, yeah, I got away from all that heavy material and tried to have the painting itself express that materiality. Yeah.
Thank you.
Nice.
I appreciate your time. Thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for those great questions. And actually, do you have something to say?
Yeah, I wanted to say something to Molly. You know, a loving reflection the way I do. I love the way that your patterns on the tablecloth, sometimes they would just rise right up in the color. They would bloom. And I love that. I find that very exciting. And I'm sitting in a library right now, not to criticize the library because this is the way art history has been for women. But I'm in the art reference room and there's not one woman in it except for Georgia. And that's recent. When you all, when I was growing up, I'm so shocked to say I didn't even notice their absence. It just was that these were all the great artists and I studied them, etc. And Jansen's book is still up there on the shelves. And there's nothing there about women artists. And we have definitely published enough. And so I just wanted to point that out. You know, I love the fact that you're focusing on what women have been doing consistently and constantly for centuries. It just hasn't been recognized as art. But anyway, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Thank you for saying that. I mean, I have a lot of like quilting and crafts women in my family, and grew up like doing all kinds of crafts, and I think that's one of the things that really that the pattern and decoration movement was talking about is just taking their inspiration from craftspeople and emphasizing that and putting value to it. So it's something I'm really interested in.
Yeah, lovely. Yeah.
Right. Thank you guys so much. I just really want to quickly plug Women in the Work has an exhibition right now, Trajectory of Grief. Please stop by if you can. We have an artist talk on the 29th of this month at 11. And then it sounds like Jesselyn and Molly, y'all both have shows opening in July. So we're excited to hear and see more about that, as well as the flower making workshop that you're holding, Jesselyn. That sounds really beautiful. And again, I want to thank all the 4 artists who presented today. I really enjoyed hearing about y'all's background, your process, and then seeing that in y'all's work as well. I thought we had a really beautiful conversation and questions that we all had for each other, and that I hope we can stay connected after this. So thank you all so much for participating in this edition of Fresh from the Studio.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah,
Thank you for having me.
thanks. Y'all have a great rest of your day.
Thank
It's
you.
so
Bye,
nice to meet you.
everyone.
Bye.